Hare Krishna, everybody. Prabhu, thank you for joining. And I'm going to just do introduction to Ujjvala Das Prabhu, His Grace. Today's Sunday feast is ISKCON Naperville, is given by His Grace Ujjvala Das Prabhu. Ujjvala Das Prabhu has been practicing Bhakti Yoga for the last 6 years. He has lived in various ashramas as brahmachari, absorbed in shastric study, kirtans and cooking. He has been serving in ISKCON Chicago since 1.5 years. Loves to be taken serious interest in study of Srimad Bhagavatam and other works of Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradayas. So, Prabhu, welcome to our Sunday feast. We are eager to hear from you.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay.
Prabhu, if you have anything to share, you can do a screen share.
Okay, great.
Welcome.
Let's see. I don't really have a presentation of any kind, but I guess I'll just throw my camera on so you guys can see me. Haribol, thank you everyone for allowing me to be here and inviting me to speak. I've actually, somehow in my 1.5 years being in Chicago, I've not made it over to Naperville. I mean, half of that has been with this craziness, and also traveling is there, but it's my great misfortune that I haven't been able to meet some of you. I'm sure we've also met at the Chicago Temple. I was there for nearly a year's time, but I look forward to spending this time with you. And again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at your Sunday feast. I was asked to speak a little bit about deepening one's experience in Kartik. I think it was Lighting the Lamp Within was the title that we came to. So when I was thinking about that topic, I was kind of dwelling on it a bit, and it's something that sometimes can easily fall into like a very hackneyed cliche, where it's one of those things that we've heard so much about. And so the tendency is just to tune out, especially if it's not, if we're not talking about somebody who's a really fantastic speaker. So I was kind of racking my brain as to, how could I spend an hour, or rather, not waste all of your time with something that you've all just heard over and over and over again. Because I guess as a speaker, you want to be a little bit impactful. So I was thinking about this, and the story that came immediately to my mind that I think has the greatest impact for me is the story of Gokarna from the Padma Purana. I don't know how many of you have heard that, but it's a really wonderful story that I'm going to narrate, and we'll run through it. There are many kind of branches that we could take with this story because it's not the shortest of stories, and there's a lot of detail there. Even the whole thing can be taken as an allegory for the body and the mind, and understanding the way one gets sucked into material life and then the way out of that through bhakti. So it's a very, very cool story. So we'll do Mangalacharana to bring in a little auspiciousness and get the blessings of the previous acharyas, hopefully. And then I'm just going to jump right in. I don't really have so much to share as far as the screen, but hopefully we can all follow along. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayham Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripam Tamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Hari Om. So this story is from the Padma Purana, and it's from a very important section of the Padma Purana for us, which is called the Bhagavatam Mahatmya. So the Bhagavatam Mahatmya, it means it's the section which delineates the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. And as we understand from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Srimad Bhagavatam is the essence of all scripture. It's the Pramanam Amalam. It literally means it's the most pure proof. Pramana means proof and Amalam means pure. So in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's opinion, the Srimad Bhagavatam is Grantharaj. It is the highest of all Shastras. So the Padma Purana is an especially sweet section of Padma Purana because it's just 6 chapters of verse after verse after verse glorifying the Bhagavatam and elucidating how amazing it is, all of its capabilities, what things that it can do. It's really, to use our common ISKCON language, it's quite nectar. So this is a particular story which is glorifying the hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's narrated by the 4 Kumaras to Sri Narada, and it's basically centering around 2 characters. One is Gokarna, and the other one is his brother Dhundukari. The other major character, which we'll talk about in the beginning, is their father Atmadev. So we start with Atmadev, and he lived on the bank of the Tungabhadra River in a village. He was a very pious Brahmana. He was basically the go-to guy for sacrifices, and because he was so virtuous, though he only begged, he was quite wealthy, and he really didn't have much strife in his life. The only thing that was a problem for him was his, although very beautiful wife, she was quite wicked. Her name was Dundali. So he was very virtuous and wealthy. His wife was very beautiful, but she did not have the same composure that he had, being a virtuous Brahmana. And sometimes we see this actually. I remember, especially before I was a devotee, sometimes I would just wonder, how is this nice person with this person? It happens somehow or other. And so this was one of those situations where you had just really the pinnacle of piety in Atmadev, and his wife was just a very, very crooked person. So Atmadev passed most of his life well-to-do. Everything went pretty okay. But as he started to grow older, he had one of the quintessential problems that we hear about in the Puranas and in the Srimad Bhagavatam. He didn't have a son. So he began to lament and become anxious over this, because in Vedic society, we understand Shraddha is very important. The forefathers must be delivered by the giving of water. And then, it's actually, from a dharmic perspective, it's considered like one of the most sinful things you can do to not produce a son, because it basically means that your dynasty is all going to fall out of heaven and stop being able to enjoy there. And certainly you aren't going to get to go. So Atmadev, being a Brahmana in Vedic society, he was lamenting quite a lot about not having a son. He had everything else, but he didn't have a son. So one day, while he was going through the forest, he came across a sannyasi, and Atmadev at this point had spent most of his wealth for sacrifices and on pious activities and things, anything that he could do in order to produce a son, because really this was life and death for him and for his duty as a Brahmana. So he came across this sannyasi, And when he saw him, he fell at his feet and started to weep. And he told him, due to my pious previous sinful activities, I don't have a son. Everything is useless for me. Without a son to offer shraddha, what is the point of anything? Anything that I do, everything is foul before I even touch it. And so he told the sannyasi, I want to give up my life. It has no real purpose. Please help me. He was calling out for help. And in the beginning, he was just elucidating his problem. So this random sannyasi, who being a very, very powerful yogi, he looked at Atmadev, and by reading his face, by reading the lines on his forehead, is particularly what the Padma Purana says, he could understand his entire life, past, present, future, what was going to happen, at least from the perspective of his karmic destiny. And so he immediately advised him, because he understood that this wasn't going to be an easy to get over problem. He said, Atmadev, you should just give up these attachments. I'll be honest with you. Fate is very, very powerful. You're not going to have a son for the next 7 lives. That's your destiny. So this sannyasi just told it to him straight, because that's what sannyasis do. They're not really, in a classical perspective, they're not meant to dance around. They travel and they tell the truth. And he gave an example. He said, remember the stories of Maharaj Anga and Sagara. Remember the miseries they underwent due to not having a son. He says, think about that. You don't need to go through that. Take sannyas. You should become renounced, because you're not going to get out of this very quickly. And so if you take the route of trying to avoid the suffering that you're getting, and you keep trying for a son, it's just going to lead deeper and deeper into heartache for you. So he says very frankly, take sannyas, Atmadev. And Atmadev, he kind of plays the classic Vedic attached karma kandi here. And he says, but there's no pleasure in sannyas life. How can one renounce if one has not had the pleasure of having wife, having a children, seeing them prosper, which is a good point, actually. It's quite, generally for people, it's quite necessary. So Atmadev, even though this sage has told him, look, this is your fate, it's going to be 7 lives, he begged in his desperation. He said, please, somehow or other, give me a son. Please give me a son. I'll do anything. And then he said, or else I'm going to give up my life. I can't do this sannyas thing. I'm going to give up my life if you don't give me a son. So the sannyasi warned him. He tried to speak truth again. He said, oh, Brahmana, think about Chitraketu. Maharaj Chitraketu, we're all familiar with this story from the Bhagavatam. So Maharaj Chitraketu, he also wanted to tinker with fate. When Angira Muni came to Maharaj Chitraketu Maharaj, who was in a similar situation to Atmadev, he said, please, I don't have a son. I am the leader of this dynasty, and the entire dynasty is going to be crushed if I can't produce one son. And Angira Muni told him, it's not your destiny. You should renounce. This isn't going to work for you. And Chitraketu Maharaj, he demanded, he said, no, my fate must be changeable. And therefore Angira Muni said, okay, I'll give you a special drink. You give it to your wife and she'll have a child. And that child's name will be Harsha Shoka. So Harsha means happiness and Shoka means misery. So he told him, this child, by this name, he's going to give you great happiness and he's going to give you great misery. I hope you're ready for that, Chitraketu. And Maharaj Angira left. And then Chitraketu, he was overjoyed because in his head, he had gotten what he wanted. So he reasoned, oh, this means that I will have a son, and then later in life, maybe he will leave untimely, or, it will be bad. Some shoka will be there. But anyway, this is what needs to happen. Excuse me. So he gave his wife the drink, and then his wife drank that potion, and she became pregnant, and she had this beautiful baby boy, Harsha Shoka. But there was a problem. Chitraketu had many other wives, and they all became jealous, and so they poisoned the baby. So immediately, Chitraketu is thinking, oh, the Shoka will come in some time. It will be, maybe some 10 years, maybe he'll leave his body before I do. But no, the Shoka came very quickly. He went from the topmost elation, I finally have a son, to utter dejection, worse, much worse than before. So this sannyasi, he reminded Atmadev of this story. He said, just see what happens when you try to tinker with fate. You can't change this. You can't change this. This was his last attempt at reasoning with Atmadev. He says, none of your endeavors are going to be successful in the face of powerful providence. But since I see there's no changing your mind and you're asking me like this, what else can I do? And so he decided to give Atmadev what he was asking for. The sannyasi then gave Atmadev a special fruit that his wife was to eat. It usually goes like this in these stories. So he gave the special fruit and he said, your wife will surely have a child after eating this fruit. Make sure so that the child is pious and generous and is of a Brahminical nature, that for a year after she eats the fruit, she should follow a vow of truthfulness, charity, cleanliness, and mercy. And by doing that, the child will be righteous and pious. So Atmadev was overjoyed. He returned home to tell his wife the news, and he gave her the fruit. And after telling her that and giving her the fruit, he left to perform his duties, his Brahminical requirements. And then his wife, Dunduli, being very crooked by nature, as we explained before, she immediately began to lament to her friend. She said, oh, what a great anxiety this is. This fruit is going to give me a son, and my fair body is going to be ruined by this, because pregnancy is very hard on a woman's body. She said, I may die if the child becomes stuck during labor, or if dacoits attack, how will I flee? This is literally what she says. This is in the Padma Purana. We can see she has a very crooked mind. And so when someone is crooked, they think in very convoluted ways. And so she comes up with all of these kind of irrational reasons. The first one is okay, but we see it just becomes irrational because she's very crooked. And so she's thinking, oh, only the worst will happen. I don't want to do this. Another thing she says is, what if this child decides to remain in my womb for 16 years like Shukadev? She thinks this. She says this to her friend. And then what's worse, I have to follow all these strictures for an entire year. Then the child will need to be raised. So she was immediately thinking, I don't want a child. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want this responsibility. This is going to be nothing but bad for me, bad for me, bad for me. So having told her friend this and thinking like this, she hid the fruit and she deceitfully told her husband she had eaten it. She said, oh, Atmadev, yes, it was wonderful. Excuse me. I've eaten this fruit. It was great. So things will go on. Then one day her sister visited and she told her sister the entire story. So Dunduli said, oh, I've gotten this fruit. And apparently it's going to make me, my husband got it from a sannyasi, from a great sage. And apparently if I eat it, then I'm going to become pregnant. And oh, sister, I don't want this. This is such a terrible thing. It's going to do all these things to me and I'm going to have to follow rules and then I'll have to raise a child. So her sister, being of an equal nature with her, having the same kind of temperament, she hatched a plan. She said, oh, Dunduli, listen, currently I'm pregnant. I will take this child, and after I deliver it, I'll secretly give him to you. You pose pregnant for now. So you pretend to be pregnant for now, Dunduli, and offer some wealth to my husband so that he will not mind giving the child to you. Because it's also a big thing. The husband is going to want his child, but he's also crooked. All three of them are quite crooked. And then her sister says, we will arrange that everyone believes I have a miscarriage somewhere around the 6 or 7 month mark. And then what we'll do to seal the deal on the plan is, because you aren't actually pregnant, so you won't produce any milk, we can suggest that I come and nurse the baby, because everyone will know I had a miscarriage and I'm actually pregnant, so I will produce milk. So we can tell your husband, oh, for some reason you have a baby, but your breast is dry, but your sister can come and she can nurse the baby because she doesn't have a baby anymore. And so in this way, they hatched this diabolical, very deceitful plan to deceive Atmadev. And then her sister said, let us test this fruit by giving it to a cow, because they were curious. Well, this is some sage has given it. It must have some potency. So they fed the fruit to a cow, and they carried out the plan. The resultant child who was born was named by Dhunduli as Dhundukari. After 3 months, the cow who ate the fruit also gave birth to a human child, and his name was Gokarna. Gokarna was extremely beautiful. He was peaceful and divine looking because he came from this fruit that the sage had given, and his mother, naturally being a cow, performed austerities and was peaceful and clean and nice, so he came out with a similar disposition. Atmadev raised both of them, thinking them both to be his children, because on the one hand, he wholeheartedly believed that Dhundukari was his child, and then because Gokarna had been kind of miraculously born from one of his cows, anyway, another male child is here, I will raise him. So Gokarna, whose name is Gokarna because the one thing that he kept from his cow mother was he had quite cow-like ears. We can imagine Indian cows usually have these very droopy ears. If we look at Gir cows in Vrindavan, they have these ears that come down kind of like upside down cups. So I've seen pictures drawn. Gokarna was like a man, but he had ears like that. It's pretty far out because Gokarna literally means cow ear. So he was very intelligent and scholarly because he had this nature, and he grew more and more scholarly and more peaceful and very Brahminical as he grew up. While Dhundukari, who Atmadev believed was his actual son, he was a rogue. He did every imaginable thing. If we think of a Jamil from the 6th canto, Dhundukari is like a Jamil's doppelganger. Doppelganger means like an exact copy. So he wouldn't perform Brahminical duties. He wouldn't follow any rules. He was expert in stealing and envious. He would literally, the Padma Purana tells us that he would go and set fire to other people's houses, and he would abduct babies and throw them in wells. He took pleasure in violent activities. He always had weapons with him. He was attached to prostitutes, and he wasted all his father's wealth in such activities. One day, he severely beat his parents. This is Atmadev and Dhunduli. And he took all their pots and utensils in the house and sold them in order to fuel some more of his nefarious activities. And in this way, all of Atmadev's property was lost. Finally, Atmadev could bear no more of this. And he lamented and lamented, what is the point of ever having had a son in the first place? I was so much happier before this. Now everything I own is destroyed. I'm in debt. I'm constantly harangued, harassed by this child. And he went to his son Gokarna, and he was lamenting like this because he was thinking, this boy is so good though. This boy is so good. And Gokarna, because he was studying the Shastras, he consoled his father, and he advised him to do what the sannyasi had advised him to do. He said, oh father, this life is ephemeral. And if karma has given you what it's given you, all you can do is accept it and then move forward. But you should renounce. You should give this up once and for all, because you see, you're suffering the fruits of your karma. But if you renounce, and he told him, take to bhakti. You take to the practice of bhakti, and then you will find the ultimate beatitude. You will find Sri Krishna. So Atmadev, because of this suffering that he had undergone, he was able to take this kind of bitter medicine this time. And finally being able to see the truth, he went to the forest, and the Padma Purana says that he recited the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam until he left his body and attained Sri Krishna. So then one day, Dhundukari, because he was still around, he beat his mother so severely. This is how wicked this person was. We're going to see the wickedness of Dhundukari. He beat his mother so severely and demanded all of her wealth, and then he threatened to burn her. So she gave him everything she had, and being completely traumatized by this behavior and seeing no way to get away from it, because basically she was under the protection of her son. Her husband had left, and her son was the most wicked person she had ever met. So being overly troubled by him and being terrified of him, one night Dhunduli snuck out of the house and she threw herself into a well and drowned. So Atmadev has gone to the forest. He's renounced everything. Dhunduli has now thrown herself into a well and drowned. She's suffered the result of her own crookedness. Gokarna, hearing this, he left for pilgrimage because he wasn't attached to family life anyway, because he was so absorbed in the Shastras and he was such a saintly character. So the Padma Purana tells us that he left at this moment for pilgrimage, being uninterested in worldly things and just overall having a distaste for the whole situation. Dundukari remained in the house of his father, and he invited 5 prostitutes there. Desiring to please them, again, we see parallels with the Ajamil Leela, he did more and more wicked things just to please these 5 prostitutes. He stole everything he could for them, anything they asked for, beg, borrow, or steal. That was his motto. Whatever he could do in order to please these ladies, in order to derive more pleasure, that's what he did. But one day, this attitude of his finally turned on him. The devil got his due, so to speak. The prostitutes, they came together and they thought, this man, Dundukari, he's so wicked that eventually the king is going to come and confiscate everything he has stolen. Without a doubt, he's killed so many people, he's stolen so many things, it's just a matter of time before the king of the land understands who he is and what he's doing, before word travels there. And then he's going to come and he's going to confiscate everything. And then we're going to be left with absolutely nothing. So these 5 prostitutes, they said, better we kill him now and take everything away elsewhere. We should take all of this wealth and go somewhere else where no one can find us. Nobody will be able to make the connection. And then we will make out with at least happiness for us. Because if we stay here, then we're going to be bereft. So hatching this plan, they killed Dundukari one night in his sleep and they left that place. Dundukari then became a ghost because of all of his bad misdeeds, all of the terrible things that he did. There was really no fate left for him. So he became a ghost and he haunted that house. When Gokarna heard of his brother's fate, being a good brother, he went to Gaya to perform Shraddha. So he went to Gaya and he performed the Shraddha ceremony to allow his brother to move on. Then, after going on pilgrimage, he ended up finally coming back around to his village. And it said that he snuck into the village because he didn't really want to be seen by anybody. And he stayed the night in his former house. That night, he was attacked by a ferocious ghost. I think we all know who that ghost was. And Gokarna, understanding the nature of these things, but not understanding who the ghost was, asked, "Who are you? Why are you like this?" And the ghost, he couldn't speak because he's a ghost. Ghosts have very unstable bodies. They have what is it? Humans and people with corporeal gross forms, they have a stable body and an unstable mind. But if you're a ghost, you have an unstable body and an unstable mind. So everything is useless. You're just suffering. You're just suffering. You can't fulfill any of your desires. Everything is terrible for you. That's why they're always so agitated. So the ghost could only howl loudly. He couldn't answer back to Gokarna. But Gokarna, being very Brahminical and understanding these things, he sprinkled some holy water on this ghost who was standing there and just wailing and wailing. And the ghost became a little purified. And then he was able to speak. So the ghost said to him, "Gokarna, I'm your brother, Dundukari. Because of my misdeeds, I'm stuck like this. My sins are uncountable. Please, somehow or other, deliver me from this wretched fate. I can't take this anymore. My sins are so bad, but I cannot live like this." Now, Gokarna was bewildered because he had just performed, or maybe not just, but he had already performed the Shraddha for Dundukari. And so from his understanding, you perform the Shraddha ceremony. And then whatever that soul has done, they're supposed to be able to move forward. So he said, "I've already performed this Shraddha. How can you still be like this? How can you be stuck in this form? There's nothing more I can really do. If I hadn't done this yet and found you like this, then that would be what I would do. I would go to Gaya and I would perform Pinda. I would do offerings of Pinda for you. But what can I do?" But Gokarna, because he was naturally a good soul, he was firmly resolved in figuring out a way to deliver his brother. So he thought about the matter, and he approached some sages who were in the village. And he asked those sages, "What should I do?" And they advised him to request the sun god for an answer. So he, through the power of meditation, he was able to contact the sun god and ask him for a solution. And Surya told him, there's only one thing which can deliver your brother. He's so sinful, there's only one real option that he could do, or that you can do, in order to benefit him and save him from this fate that he has. He says, the only thing which you can deliver your brother, which can deliver your brother, is Bhagavat Saptaha. So for 7 days, there must be continuous recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Gokarna immediately set out to do this. He was already a little familiar with the Bhagavatam. He had associated with some Vaishnavas. And so he announced to everyone in the village and the nearby villages that there was going to be a Bhagavat Saptaha, that they were going to do this great recitation of the entirety of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So all the Vaishnavas came, all the sages came, all the villagers from all the nearby villages, everyone came, and everybody assembled for the recitation. The ghost of Dundukari, or Dundukari as a ghost, could not sit. So everyone else found their places and became situated, but ghosts, again, because they have an unstable body, they can't just sit somewhere due to their ethereal bodies. So he rested inside a 7-knotted stick of bamboo that Gokarna had placed just in front of the place where he would read the Bhagavatam. So Dundukari was sitting in the bamboo. Gokarna was sitting at the podium. He took the blessings of the senior-most Vaishnava there, and he began the recitation. He started from the first canto at the very beginning. And at the end of the first day's recitation, one of the knots in the bamboo stick burst. And it went like this. Every day when they would finish and take their small break, I guess that's some little rest needs to be there. You can't just go 7 days with nothing. Every day, day 2, day 3, day 4, another one of those 7 knots would burst. So by the end of the 7th day, the final knot burst, and Dundukari emerged with a beautiful blackish form, similar to that of Sri Krishna. He came out of the bamboo and he began to glorify the Bhagavatam and the process of Bhagavat Saptaha. So he said, when a person starts hearing the Saptaha, sins tremble in fear, anticipating that the Bhagavat Katha will burn them to ashes. Moreover, this one's quite beautiful. He says, by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, one's doubts are removed. The karma is slackened and one becomes relieved of the knots in the heart. If this Bhagavat Katha can burst the knots of bamboo, then why can it not burst those in the heart? So he says many things. I can't go through the entire list because it's 20 or 30 verses of glorification of the power of Bhagavat Katha. But as he was speaking, as Dundukari was glorifying the Bhagavatam in this way, the sky became effulgent and a Vimana appeared with associates of the Lord, with the Vishnu Dutas. They had come to take Dundukari. And in front of the entire assembly, all of them, Dundukari boarded that airplane. And he left. He went to the spiritual abode. Now, this is great, but it raised a big question, because there were a lot of exalted Vaishnavas in that assembly. There were many sages. Gokarna himself was a very, very, very pious person. He had already received the mercy of the Vaishnavas. He himself was reading the book. They all heard the narration. So why did only the sinful Dundukari attain such a glorious fate? This Gokarna asked to the Vaikuntavasis just before they left. And the Vaikuntavasis gave quite a simple answer. They said, it is a matter of the quality of hearing. Dundukari, he sat in rapt attention for the whole narration. He didn't waver an inch. He was in that bamboo. He fasted for the whole time. I mean, he was a ghost, so he didn't really have a choice but to fast. But the Padma Purana says he fasted, and that was part of what helped him to focus. But the point is, he focused for the entirety of the narration. He didn't miss a drop. Everyone else, they were going here and there. They went in, oh, I'm hungry. I'll go take some prasad. I'll take some prasad as I hear. They had sleeping time. They were talking amongst each other. They all heard the katha, but they did not meditate on it to the degree that Dundukari did. For this reason, the results of performing bhajan differ. So basically, because of the level of absorption and really because of the way one turns one's consciousness, that dictates what one will get out of one's bhajan. After saying that, the Vaikuntavasis left. So Gokarna, again, desiring the good of everybody there, he performed another saptaha in the month of Shravan, in which all the same people who had seen the miraculous deliverance of Dundukari attended, all the same Vaishnavas, Brahmanas, the villagers. It says even the Chandalas came, everyone came, even the dogs that were there, they paid attention because they had seen this thing. Imagine if you saw somebody come down from Vaikuntha, you saw 4 Vaikuntavasis come down, Vishnu Dutas, and bring somebody back to Godhead and then tell you, if you pay attention, you can come too next time. You will sit down and pay attention, right? Because that seeing is believing. This is what we want. So all these people, they had the great fortune of seeing this firsthand. So when the next Saptaha came around, they went and they sat. They didn't think, oh, let me go eat. Let me go do something. They just thought, I need to absorb this. And because of that rapt attention and meditation that they had on this second time around, they all attained the same fate. In fact, this time, Sri Krishna himself came in a vimana, blowing his conch. He embraced Gokarna because the Vishnu Dutas, they had told Gokarna, don't worry about yourself. You're already very dear to Krishna, and he's just waiting to come, and he's going to personally embrace you. So this word was fulfilled. He came, and he embraced Gokarna, and then the entirety of the people who were in the assembly, because of their fixed, rapt meditation, they all got Vaikunthavasi forms, and they went back to the Lord's abode. So that's the story. And the point that this brings out for me that I'd like to share, and I don't count on the fact that my words will have much power. I'm sure you could hear from many more people that are more inspiring, but at least I can try to share this point, that what this story says at the very basis of it is that consciousness is the most important factor in devotional service. Actually, the only thing we can do, we're all jivas. We only have one choice in this world. The only thing we have power to do is orient our consciousness in a particular direction. That's what we do. If we decide, oh, I want to do this, what are we doing? Actually, we're looking at it and we're asking for permission from the supersoul, from material nature, from our karmic destiny. We're asking, I would like to do this. And then the super soul says, okay, yes, you're qualified to have that happen. So, and then it plays out in front of you. You think you're interacting with it, but actually it's just the modes interacting. And you're not really doing anything other than orienting your consciousness towards that thing. Similarly, in our bhajan, the only thing we really have power to do is orient our consciousness towards Krishna. That's the only thing that we can do. And that's actually the only thing that's asked of us, is the beauty of it. It's such a simple thing, but as Srila Prabhupada said, it's so simple that you might miss it. It's simultaneously the simplest thing and most effective thing we have in our arsenal. So my suggestion for trying to have a deep Kartik, trying to light this lamp within for this Kartik, is not to take tremendous vows. It's not to, although those things are good, I'm not disparaging those things. I've had quite a few nice Kartiks where I thought I'm going to do a lot extra. I'm in the Dham. None of us are in the Dham this year. Some of you maybe, I don't know if someone is tuned here, but anyone who's in Chicago, you're not in the Dham, you're not going to the Dham for Kartik. Because maybe some of you, if you're Indian citizens, you have a way. And I pay my dandavats at your lotus feet because you're very fortunate for that. I would love to be in Vrindavan right now. But I don't say, let's take some tremendous vow, let's read for 6 hours a day, or even 2 hours a day, or let's, do kirtan for this amount of time, or chant this many extra rounds. This story to me says that the best thing that I can do for Kartik, and the best thing that any of us can do to try to have a deep Kartik, is to be attentive, even for the shortest amount of time. Simply try to pay attention to the things that we do, the things that we already do. When we offer that lamp, if we're going to offer a lamp every day, really try to be there. when we offer the lamp. Really try to actually, don't let it fall into a ritual in which, yes, I'm supposed to offer this lamp, and everyone else is doing it, and yeah, it's nice. And let's really try to be there and really try to do that. One nice thing for one round, because many times with our rounds, we have to chant so many every day. And it's easy to make that a habit that we kind of just out of necessity turn into something that we have found really, really bad habits of getting through. I'm certainly guilty of this. And it's something I'm trying to really revamp in my life because it's been very up and down, and a lot of times more down than up, is to focus on something small. So, okay, I have bad habits with chanting my japa, and I have a tendency to think about other things, maybe even if they're devotional, but I'm not really thinking about my japa. Let me chant one round a day for Kartik, just saying the only thing I'm going to do for this round, for this 5 to 7 minutes, is focus on a picture, focus on the holy name, something small that we do every day during Kartik. And it's my suspicion and my experience with the things that I have done this with is that from that little place, a lot of depth can grow, because really that's what bhajan means. Bhajan means to turn your consciousness towards Krishna, and no amount of other things that we do will turn our consciousness towards Krishna. It doesn't matter how nice they sound from the outside. Even seva, if we do seva in a mindless way and we just think the seva is going to save me, then in one sense, yes, we don't disparage that. It's going to keep you around. But at the end of the day, these are actually all just opportunities to turn our consciousness towards Krishna, to turn our consciousness towards our Gurudev, to turn our consciousness towards the Vaishnavas. And if we're not doing that, nothing else can bear fruit properly. Just as all of these people sat for 7 days and heard the Bhagavatam continuously, start to finish, their result was a matter of their consciousness being turned towards Krishna. And the beautiful thing about this is it's not all or nothing, because the more you try to turn your consciousness towards Krishna, the more of a result you're going to get. It's not that you have to hit a certain level on the meter and then boom, there's a result. If you do 5% consciousness towards Krishna, then you're going to get a lot more than none. And if you do 20%, you're going to get more. And if you work your way slowly, it's like a spectrum. And that spectrum is slowly going to enter into our lives and help us to go deeper into this. So that's my suggestion, is let us take a simple vow of attentiveness when we do these things. And I also think that's such a good thing, because many of us have busy lives and difficult lives. And it's much harder to think, oh yes, for this whole month, I'm going to do 2 hours extra of this thing. Whereas it may be much more potent and simultaneously much easier if we say, you know what, for 10 minutes, everything else in my life takes a total back seat. Not even a back seat, it's out of the car. For 10 minutes every day during Kartik, there's nothing else going on but me sitting in front of, whether it's reading, whether it's chanting, whatever it is, whatever we have our inclination for amongst the practices of bhakti. So those are my thoughts. Now, because we've been talking about the Bhagavatam, I'll just give a couple of verses to substantiate what I'm saying. So one of the most famous ones is 7.132 of the Bhagavatam. Tasmat kena pyupayena mana krishne niveshayet. And this is very nice because this takes all of the rules, so to speak, out of the equation. Tasmat means therefore. Kena pyupayena. Kena api upayena. By any means whatsoever. Another way that this verse is said in common vernacular is Yena kena prakarena mana krishne niveshayat. By whatever means you can think of, whatever works for you, mana krishne niveshayat. Fix your mind on Krishna. Fix your mind in Krishna. And then another beautiful verse from Padma Purana, which we've all heard. Smartavya satatam vishnur vismartavyo najatuchit sarve vidhi nishedhasyor etayor eva kinkaraha. Smartavya satatam vishnur. Vishnu should always be remembered. Vismartavyo najatuchit, and he should never be forgotten. Sarve vidhi nishedhasyor. All of these vidhis that are in the Vedas, every vidhi which prohibits or allows something in the Vedas etayor eva kinkaraha. They are all the kinkaras, or the servants of these two rules, that one should remember Krishna and one should endeavor not to forget Krishna. Now, again, I'm not advocating that we just try to jump to a platform of, yes, Prabhu, I'm thinking of Krishna all the time. But let's start from a very practical place and spend 10 minutes just, and if you're already doing that, do 30 minutes. If you're already doing that, do an hour. For Kartik, let's pour as much more quality consciousness time as we can towards Krishna. I think that attention is the greatest fuel with which to kindle the lamp within. And actually, as I said before, it's the only kindling we have. We don't have any other fuel. That's what Krishna consciousness means. Turn our consciousness towards Krishna. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I hope that something of it was useful. Yadatra skalitam kinchit. If there's anything here that you found that is not so palatable, not so nice, Vidvamsu Puranantitat, you are all learned sages. You're all Vaishnavas. Many of you have probably been practicing Krishna consciousness for years and years and years longer than I have. So please correct it. Please fix it, because I'm here to learn. Ultimately, I'm in a group of Vaishnavas so that I can learn how to be a better Vaishnava, and I can learn how to actually one day become a nice servant. And yad atra shoshtavam kinchit. If you've seen something nice, however, Tadgurur Eva, it's my gurus, it's the people that I am blessed to be able to call my teachers, it belongs to them. May nahi, it's not mine. So if there are any comments or questions or corrections, anything, please welcome them now. And I'd like to hear, we have like 12 more minutes, any thoughts here, or if anybody has anything to add, it'd be very much appreciated.
Thank you, Prabhu, for wonderful class. If anybody have any question, please unmute yourself and you can ask, or you can send in a chat. You can read. If you are speaking on mute, please unmute. Let me see any questions on YouTube. I do not.
Hare Krishna, Ujjwal Prabhu. Thank you so much. This is Amrita. I have heard this story many times, but it's really very beautiful the way you have narrated, highlighting the points. It's very impactful, especially the conclusion part. We just had this Purushottam month, and I have been contemplating on this. We keep taking these vows, and it's nice to take that time and go more deeper. But as you mentioned, we have busy lives, and I commit those things, and then a few days it happens, and then the material energy and our busy schedules, everything goes on, and then I feel guilty of it, and then I say I'm not even gonna do what I'm not doing. This kind of cycle goes on. This is really very meaningful the way you have shared the conclusive part. And I'm particularly wanting to hear more, if you could share about these vows. It's nice to commit to some extra, rounds or reading or something. That's what we hear. Quality is important, but quantity is also important. Anything, if you could share something on that, how we can balance that quantity and quality.
Okay. Yeah, I think one thing that I think it's very important to take a vow on the basis of what you already very much are interested in. Because devotional service is like, especially with Panchanga Bhakti, we have these 5 things. This Sadhu Sangha Nama Kirtan Bhagavata Shravan Mathura Vasa Srimurtira Shraddhaya Sevana. So these 5 things are all equally powerful. It's said like this in the Bhagavatam as well. That's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu quotes when he says this. Any one of these things can deliver one all the way to prema. And so if we're going to take vows to do extra, and we're not going to approach it in a way that is simply, let me get some extra points, because actually that's not really the right way to think about bhakti. Bhakti is not about stacking up some points and then exchanging them for a gift. We're not looking to do that. Prahlad Maharaj says, I'm not interested in an exchange with you, Lord Nrsimhadev. So if we're going to do extra, it should be on the basis of, I really like to do this particular thing, and so I'm going to take a vow to encourage myself to stick to doing it more. Like for me, I'll be honest with you, I really like to read Srimad Bhagavatam. It's been immensely impactful for me after some point in my devotional life where I realized that actually most of my devotional experience is coming from the reading of Shastra. I don't want to make it into something that is, mystical or anything like that, but just from an experiential level, most of what I've gotten has come through absorption in the Shastra. And so the first go-to for me is, okay, so I'm going to take a vow to read an extra hour every day. That's because that's something I know, like I'm into that, and I can really absorb myself when I do that. Now, before, my go-to would be, I'm going to chant extra rounds, because that's what a good Hare Krishna would do. And that may be good because you may battle the mind and you may see, oh, it's not so hard to chant 32 rounds versus 16. It's more a matter of my mind telling me it's intolerable and just realizing that I'm not my mind, and I can actually tell him to shut up and chant. But really, we should be focusing on where we have some taste and finding a way to get taste in what we're already doing. You know what I mean? Because if we just keep trying to push and push and push, but we don't deal with the root of the problem, which is that I'm not actually turning my consciousness towards Krishna in my bhajan, then I may chant 100 rounds a day. But if I'm just, yes, listen, I'm chanting 100 rounds a day, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, and just banging through that and finding a way to think of something else and, pace back and forth to do it, it's not going to be nearly as effective as if I really focus on the quality of what I'm doing. Because as long as you're doing the minimum, my personal understanding is that you're doing the minimum. So just work on the quality of that minimum already. You've taken your vows, you're doing your initiation, work on the quality of that. Now, doing extra may also help with increasing the quality overall. But if it doesn't, then we have to question within ourselves, how much am I really going to benefit from that? Because Krishna doesn't want to see that, yes, I do, 64 rounds for him, even though it's intolerable for me. He wants to see that I'm starting to turn to him, right? Those are my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Very, very practical and very helpful. Just the last punchline. Krishna wanted to see us happy to make him happy. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I thought of that, I was thinking one day, because I was having a really tough day with japa, and it was just like, and then I had this thought, I'm doing this for my Gurudev. And then I realized, that's actually stupid. I'm not doing this for my Gurudev. My Gurudev has given me a gift. And it's my job to orient my consciousness in a way that I actually realize what that gift is, and then start to actually tap into it. If I don't want to go 20 years thinking, yes, Gurudev, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this for you. I'm not doing it for, he's given me a gift, right?
Thank you, Prabhu. Prabhu, we have a question on the chat from Ashish Adav Prabhu. In his class, we normally come across situations where we want things which are not meant for us, but we still ask for those. It's a good reflection on not to and not to those things. How do we overcome those thoughts?
One second, I just want to pull up a verse. I wish we could get some clarification on exact, because that's it's kind of a little bit of a, I don't know, there's a lot of wiggle room there in wanting things that we don't want. A lot of times what I find is this is a matter of clarification and understanding, like, where is the guilt coming from? What is it that you're saying that you want that you're not supposed to want? Because Krishna consciousness isn't really about not being supposed to want or not want anything. Krishna consciousness is about experiencing Krishna bhajan, and then param drishtva nivartate. After experiencing something higher, not wanting those things anymore. So, if it's something very base, then we need sadhu sangha in order to say, okay, yes, I don't do that. But if it's something that's more in the middle, we're supposed to find a way that, okay, I do this thing, and I understand that it's not what I'm ultimately going to do as like the goal of my life, but I simply do it in the mood that I'm doing enough of it to pacify my mind so I can engage in bhajan. Rupa Goswami has said like this, we're not interested in beating the mind into a pulp and then becoming vairagis. We're not vairagis. Prabhupada said, you take nice Krishna prasadam, you hang out with devotees, we do what we need within reason, as long as it's not adharmic, and then we do bhajan. So there's one verse to just highlight this that I want to share. It's a very, very nice verse for this understanding. Let me just pull up the database. 5:19:27. Here we go. Share screen. I hope everyone can see that. Satyam dishatyartitam artito ninam naivartado yat punarartita yata swayam vitate bhajatam anichatam ichha pidhanam nijapada pallavam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead fulfills the material desires of a devotee who approaches him with such motives, but he does not bestow benedictions upon the devotee that will cause him to demand more benedictions again. And this is the important part, that first sentence. However, the Lord willingly gives the devotee shelter at his own lotus feet, even though such a person does not aspire for it, and that shelter satisfies all his desires. That is the Supreme Personality's special mercy. So actually, it's not your job to desire or not desire something. It's not your job to say, no, I don't desire this anymore. The lack of material desire comes as Krishna's mercy. It's not something that you control or do not control. And so we turn to Krishna and we say, Krishna, I have this desire. I know that you are the ultimate benefactor of everybody. I want to be your devotee, and I don't want to go anywhere else to fulfill this desire. So we ask him, please help me with this. Help me with this thing. And then we understand Krishna is going to give it in such a way that you don't want it anymore. Now, there are many other Bhagavatam verses we can quote to explain this, but we can just trust that Krishna is the best doctor, and he knows how to extricate these things from the heart, and he will do it. I'm sure any of us who have been around long enough, I've been around not for a terribly long time, but long enough to look back and see the extrication of things that I wanted. Maybe, you see, this is so subtle. We may not even admit that we want them. It may even be a subconscious want, whether it's a need for recognition or a need for, so many things. But Krishna, he sees, this is your real desire. And he gives it to you in such a way that, oh, wow, yeah, I don't want that. I want Krishna bhajan. This is so complicated and difficult. And, it's a classic, even in material life. You get tons of money, and what do you have? Tons of headache. You just, oh man, now I have so much money and so much responsibility, and I'm just busy as anything. I don't have any freedom because I have to maintain all of this. Now, I'm not advocating against that. I'm just saying it's a basic principle. Luckily, we're devotees, and so we have Krishna's will guiding our lives at basically every moment. That's what the Bhagavatam tells us. It's simply a matter of us turning our consciousness towards that and starting to catch the messages. When we start to catch the messages, then things become easier because we're actually listening. But if we're not listening, then we only see Krishna's hand when it's devastating. So I would say, again, your question's a little difficult to pin down because I don't know exactly what you're saying you want that you're not supposed to want. But I would say, re-examine, what does it mean? Like, what are you supposed to want or not supposed to want? You're simply supposed to hang out with the sadhus and do Krishna bhajan, and then everything else is going to work itself out. Orient your life in such a way that I can do my bhajan, and then everything else is going to follow that from the mercy of the sadhus and the mercy of Krishna from you actually turning your consciousness towards him. I'll just...
Thank you, Prabhu.
I stop this. Sorry, I'm super technologically illiterate. There it is.
We'll just take one more minute if anybody have any other comments, questions. Okay, thank you so much for your time, spending time with us today, Sunday. We really appreciate. It's a very wonderful class, and we want to hear from you again sometime near soon. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thanks everybody so much for being here, tolerating. Very much appreciate it. And thank you for the excuse to kind of dive into this for myself for Kartik, because it's very important and I've learned a lot actually in just thinking about this stuff. So Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Jai. Haribol.